Is Yelan one of the most recommended limited characters to roll for any account? Yes. Am I going to sit here and tell you that you have to pull for her? Absolutely not, since some people just want to save primos and hopefully have fun with some of the new and upcoming Notland characters. But for those who already have Yelan and want to fix her build and learn something new about her, or for those who just pulled Yelan in patch 4.8, there are 3 things that make Yelan both a star of the past and future proof. 1. She has stellar offense. 2. Her build options are very straightforward. And 3. She has unmatched team flexibility. When I say stellar offense, what do I mean by that? Well, for starters, if you look at Yelan's kit at the most basic level, every part of her kit is cohesive. Yelan is a character whose elemental skill and burst have max HP damage scaling, and her Ascension 1 passive increases her HP based on how many different element types there are in the party. While Yelan's skill is fantastic for exploring and deals decent damage, the majority of Yelan's kit strength in combat is loaded into her elemental burst. Yelan's elemental burst will summon a dice for 15 seconds that follows your active character and launches 3 coordinated hits whenever your active character normal attacks, with a 1-second cooldown between each wave of coordinated hits. If an enemy is damaged by Yelan's skill while her burst is active, her skill will also trigger these 3 coordinated hits, and this has no cooldown. That means if you're really advanced and care about optimized rotations, you can burst, normal attack, skill, normal attack, and swap out in quick succession to maximize the frequency of her coordinated burst hits. The only downside of doing this is depending on how fast you execute the combo, you may not be able to absorb the hydro energy particles from Yelan's skill before switching out. If you find yourself struggling with Yelan's energy, you can also resort to the standard combo of skill into burst before swapping out to ensure Yelan can just absorb the hydro energy that she creates with her skill. While these coordinated hits from Yelan's burst are powerful thanks to her great HP scaling, many consider the biggest upside of her burst to actually be its rate of hydro application. Yelan's burst can apply the hydro element onto an enemy once with every single wave of coordinated hits, meaning she can apply hydro at an extremely fast rate compared to other characters. Her hydro application fits almost any team's needs and only loses out to Xingqiu's because even though his burst is almost identical to Yelan's, his Rain Sword orbitals that circle your active character will also intermittently apply hydro onto nearby enemies. The only way Yelan's hydro application can match Xingqiu's is with her C2, which grants her burst extra hits that also apply hydro onto enemies. Now you might be thinking, why would I ever pull Yelan if I already have Xingqiu since his hydro application can beat out Yelan's? Well, first of all, if you have both of them, not only can you build 2 different teams that require their levels of fast hydro application, but you can also pair them together to unlock a double hydro core that is one of the most powerful off-field duos in the game. Second, Yelan and Xingqiu provide slightly different benefits to the team beyond their hydro application and good single target damage. Xingqiu's rain orbitals on his skill and burst provide valuable defensive utility with healing, resistance to interruption, and damage reduction. Meanwhile, thanks to Yelan's Ascension 4 passive, any character on the field during Yelan's burst will get a damage percent buff that increases by 3.5% every second, up to a total of 50% damage bonus during the final second of Yelan's burst. Yelan's offensive damage percent buff and Xingqiu's defensive utility are like night and day on the battlefield, and it's really easy to notice the impact of both. The second reason why Yelan's both a fan favorite and a strong character is because how accessible her build options are and how you only have to make a decision between a few options. Although Yelan's skill only has a 10-second cooldown, her burst costs 70 energy, and some teams will not allow Yelan to return to the field during the middle of a rotation to cast her skill a second time before her burst comes off cooldown. That means energy recharge is the name of the game with her builds. If you're not running Yelan's signature weapon Aqua Simulacra, all of her best options provide some sort of energy utility, whether that be through a fat energy recharge main stat, an energy based passive, or even both. Many veteran players and theory crafters consider the Favonius Warbow to be Yelan's best option outside of her signature weapon because it provides both of those. With a 61.3% energy recharge main stat at level 90 and a passive that generates extra energy particles for the team, your energy woes are pretty much solved with this weapon. Look to get around 40% energy recharge in artifact set bonuses and substats when equipped with Favonius Warbow to hit around 200% total energy recharge for Yelan. The other most recommended weapon for Yelan is Venti's signature weapon, Elegy of the End. Even though it has a pretty respectable 55.1% energy recharge main stat, its passive is geared towards damage buffs for the team rather than resolving energy problems. Both Elegy of the End and Aqua Simulacra Yelan players will want to aim for 220 plus energy recharge, which means with Aqua Simulacra you're most likely going to run an ER % main stat in the Sands. The final recommended bow for Yelan is Sacrificial Bow. Although it has a much lower energy recharge stat than the previous options, its passive is basically an emulation of Yelan C1, which gives her skill an extra charge. Being able to use 2 skills in quick succession at C0 with Sacrificial Bow can greatly reduce her energy requirements without having to swipe for C1. The only caveat with this is that your Sacrificial Bow needs to be at a high refinement level, specifically at least R3 or R4. At R2 or R1, the passive on the bow has too long of a cooldown and will not trigger every time Yelan takes the field to recast her burst. Assuming you can cast your skill twice every time you take the field thanks to this weapon's passive, your energy recharge requirements are only 180%, which is much lower compared to recommended numbers for Aqua Simulacra and Elegy of the End. Other bows like Fading Twilight, Slingshot, and Recurve Bow are all accessible 4-star and 3-star options that provide valuable damage stats such as damage %, crit rate, and HP % respectively, but they are usually not recommended without special case teams such as running Raiden Shogun or Xingqiu with Yelan to generate energy for her. And because we're building so much energy recharge on Yelan, her artifacts are a no-brainer as well. The 4-set Emblem of Severed Fate is a perfect fit for Yelan given most of her damage is from her burst, and this 4-set effect converts her energy recharge into burst damage bonus. If you're running any other set on Yelan, you can expect between a 15 to 25% damage loss. That's just how powerful the 4-set emblem is on Yelan. However, if you don't have a full 4-set farmed for Yelan yet, you can always mix and match any 2-set effects that provide energy recharge %, HP %, elemental burst damage bonus, or hydro damage bonus until you farmed or strongboxed enough suitable emblem pieces. As for what qualifies as suitable artifacts for Yelan, you're going to want HP % or ER % in the Sands, hydro damage % or HP % in the Goblet, and crit rate or crit damage in the Circlet. As a rule of thumb, if you don't know where to start your build by looking at your Sands. Energy-based weapons like Favonius Warbow, Sacrificial Bow, and sometimes even Elegy of the End are most likely the ones that you can get away with running HP % in the Sands. Next, for the Goblet, you generally want to choose Hydro Damage bonus. HP % in the Goblet can be a viable choice if you're running an ER % Sands, but you would almost never want to run double HP % in the Sands and Goblet because her Ascension 1 gives her HP and the Hydro Resonance can also give her HP. Instead, you would rather run 1 HP % Sands and 1 Hydro Damage bonus Goblet for optimized damage. Last but not least, crit rate and crit damage in the Circuit completely depends on whichever stat balances your crit rate to crit damage ratio the best and whichever stat you're missing more of in artifact substats. Substat priority is energy recharge first until you reach the recommended energy requirements for your specific weapon, and then crit stats and HP % afterwards. If you need a refresher on the specific ER requirements for each weapon on Yelan, feel free to revisit the weapon section. By now, it's no secret that Yelan's team flexibility is what makes her a popular recommendation to pull for many players. Hydro is an integral element to some of the strongest reactions in the game like Vaporize and Hyperbloom. Because Yelan is so flexible, I'm not going to cover every single team composition that she can fit into and extend this video's length to the 30-minute mark. Instead, I'm going to very briefly take you through some of her best teams before and after the introduction of the dendro element to hopefully still give plenty of options for player to choose from, while keeping the video short enough to respect both your time and my time. So that takes us back to Yelan's initial release date of May 31st, 2022 during patch 2.7. Back then, dendro didn't exist as a playable element and vaporized teams ruled the battlefield. Yelan was frequently paired with Hu Tao or Yoimiya at the time, but many old Pyro DPS characters like Diluc or Klee, or new Pyro DPS characters like Gaming and Arlecchino can easily be slotted into this archetype. With these teams, you'd most often have a double Hydro core that consisted of Yelan, Xingqiu, Hu Tao / Yoimiya, and finally a Shielder in the final slot. This double Hydro setup is specifically the most recommended Hu Tao setup because Yelan's solo Hydro application would be insufficient for Hu Tao in some cases, where she does the N2C animation cancels instead of the N1C animation cancels. The Shielder would most often be Zhongli, but could also be Diona, Layla, Thoma, or C4 Yanfei as some non-5-star substitutes. If you're content with just having Xingqiu's damage reduction and small heals from his rain swords, then you could even replace the shielder slot with Fischl, who was a very popular substitute, to create an Overload and Vaporize hybrid team commonly called Overvape. With characters not named Hu Tao, the Hydro application of Yelan and Xingqiu together can even be overkill in some situations, but the duo is so strong together with insane single target damage and reduced energy requirements that sometimes it doesn't even matter. If you're looking to create a Vaporize team with Yelan as your single Hydro character, here are some examples. For Yoimiya and Arlecchino, they love shielders for uninterrupted normal attacks, so usually the final slot remains the same while Xingqiu is replaced with a support like Bennett, Yunjin, or Kazuha. For Gaming, weaving in a normal attack for Yelan's burst between each plunge attack is more than enough to sustain his Vaporize playstyle. Bennett is a staple third character for Gaming due to his large attack buff and energy generation for Gaming's burst, while an Anemo support like Kazuha, Sucrose, or Shen Yun can fill the last slot. And for the other team that doesn't utilize Dendro, we have the Raiden National team, which consists of Raiden Shogun, Xingqiu, Xiangling, and Bennett. This was a very popular archetype back during Raiden Shogun's release in the early Inazuma patches, not only because it was one of the highest DPS teams at the time, but also because it was easily accessible with just one required limited 5-star character. Yelan is not a strict upgrade to Xingqiu in this team since Xingqiu's defensive utility is actually quite useful, and she's more of a side grade should you happen to have her. The two practically do the same thing with their burst because no delicate reaction combination is required in this team, so the two are pretty much interchangeable. Nothing else really needs to be said about this team aside from the fact that Raiden Shogun can ease the energy requirements of characters like Xiangling and Yelan, while the team dishes out a ton of raw burst damage, vaporize damage, and overload damage. Fast forward a couple of months past Yelan's release date and the Dendro element makes its debut in patch 3.0. While not every archetype that used Dendro that we have today immediately settled in, standard Hyperbloom and Burgeon teams were powerful from the get-go. For Yelan, a standard Hyperbloom or Burgeon team usually consisted of her, a Dendro applicator, and your full EM unit between Raiden Shogun, Kuki Shinobu, and Thoma, who triggered their respective reactions off-field. Since Yelan is also an off-field unit, your Dendro application could be an on-field unit with characters like Alhaitham, Nahida, and Baiju, or off-field units with Yao Yao, Kale, and Dendro MC. In the final slot, you have a plethora of options because Yelan provides good enough Hydro application to be a solo Hydro character if she needs to, but also not too much Hydro application to the point where you'll never get other reactions like Quicken. Running a second Dendro character in the final slot out of any of the Dendro options mentioned previously is a great way to fill this slot without thinking, since more Dendro application and Dendro energy is usually appreciated and the Dendro resonance is great for buffing the EM of the team. Running a Cryo character in the final slot can also aid the team's Bloom generation due to the way it's able to react with Hydro in Hyperbloom and Burgeon to keep the Dendro aura on enemies longer. Rosaria, Kaya, Diona, Layla, and Ganyu are all great off-field cryo options for this role and can provide various buffs via their kits and builds. On the flip side, Eula or Fermine can be the on-field DPS for this team and make good of the occasional superconduct reaction that happens between Electro and Cryo since they are physical carries. Just be mindful that with some of these characters without a second cryo character, their energy requirements do skyrocket, so you're going to have to compensate for that in their builds. But if none of these characters entice you, then Fischl again is another final character that I'd recommend running in this slot. For Hyperbloom, Oz does not target Dendro cores with enemies in his presence, meaning he will not be stealing Hyperbloom reactions from your Kuki or Raiden. In Burgeon, reacting Electro with Pyro to create overload can reduce the amount of burning reactions that eat up your other elemental auras, and reacting Electro with Dendro can create the Quicken aura that also extends the Dendro aura on enemies for better Dendro core creation. Other Hyperbloom adjacent teams include Quickbloom, which is basically a team that emphasizes aggravate or spread reactions with an on-field Electro or Dendro DPS, but will occasionally create Dendro cores and thus Hyperbloom reactions with the addition of a single Hydro character like Yelan. If you want to run Cyno or Chlorinde as a carry with Yelan, pick any Dendro applicator listed on screen in the third slot and then a second Electro character for off-field damage and energy. If you want to run Alhaitham for Dendro DPS with Yelan, then make sure your third slot is either Raiden, Fischl, or Kuki for Quicken, and then a second Dendro character for the Dendro resonance and extra energy for Alhaitham. I usually find the most success with Nahida for her EM buffs, Kirara for her shield, or Baiju/Yao Yao for their healing. But with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this updated Yelan guide, and most importantly, I hope this guide was helpful for building the perfect Yelan for your account. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.